Now, I'm not one to gossip, but I will bring you the tea. Welcome to Chronicle Speaks.
Please, I don't have any time for any gossip now. Eh? Yes.
Look at.
So there was a period of time last week when Tim Norman was placed in solitary confinement. In other words, Tim was placed in the hole. My question is, who dug the hole and how many people did it take to make it a double wide to fit Tim's hips? Now, let me stop. Tim was allegedly being watched while having a meeting with his attorney, and the U.S. Marshals accused Tim of using his attorney's phone. You know, they are afraid right now of witness tampering, so they threw Tim in solitary confinement and told his attorney that all meetings with Tim must cease until they decide otherwise. Then guess what? They allegedly have evidence of Andre's phone that he texted Miss Robbie days before his death saying that Tim was after him and that he wasn't running from the situation. However, he didn't want to get hurt and he knew what Tim was capable of doing and he didn't want to have anything to do with what Tim had going on. Reading that text and knowing that Andre was made aware that something may happen to him at the hands of Tim literally brought chills running down my spine. Andre's fears of something happening were absolutely right. His life was taken, and now it's up to a jury to decide if hippie long stockings had something to do with it. I promised y'all a Tim Norman update, and I'm going to do just that. But before we get into that, be sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss out on any of this tea. Now let's get back into it. Tim Norman is in for a fight for his freedom and has some high-dollar attorneys fighting tooth and nail to get him out of this never-ending rabbit hole. Tim Norman's trial will start September 6th for conspiracy to take the life of his deceased brother's only child, Andre Montgomery. Well, with the trial quickly approaching, of course, Tim would have to meet with his attorney. In a meeting held August 17th, Tim and his attorney met for about 5 hours. Now, during that meeting, his attorney brought and utilized computers, disks, and phones. During that 5-hour meeting, Tim's attorney is said to have taken one break that lasted between 5 to 8 minutes. And during that break, Tim was allowed to stand in another room outside of the room where him and his attorney had been meeting. Now, according to Angie Dennis, who is the attorney for the U.S. government, she is saying that Tim was left unattended for long periods of time in possession of one or more telephones. Now, the attorney said Tim assessed these telephones while left with them. Now, because of these allegations, Tim was placed on lockdown, but he wasn't placed on lockdown until after his attorney left. Now, after the U.S. Marshal Services placed him on lockdown, his mail privileges were revoked and so was his phone privileges, except to speak with counsel. All of his visits were revoked, including his visits with counsel. Now, all of these privileges were revoked until a further investigation could be completed. Now, Tim's attorney clapped back saying, no, this is not going to happen. Tim never made a phone call or any text, and he didn't even have my phone without me being present. He's looking at this as the government's way of making Tim lose the case if he's no longer able to have communication with his attorney the way he was before. He stated that they viewed discovery materials on the phone, but that's it. Then he hit them with this: why was my attorney-client meeting being watched? And he wants to know if the audio and video of this meeting had been obtained or shared with the U.S. government. And he wants all of the information received, including documentation from the U.S. Marshal Services about this visit. Now, during this motion that Tim's attorney filed, he demanded immediate release of Tim from solitary confinement so that he and his client can get back to business as usual. The U.S. government did respond to the motion, but it's sealed. So I can't even give you information as to what happened, but I can tell you that Tim definitely was in solitary confinement, and I can tell you the reason why. Now, since then, Tim and his attorneys have filed 2 motions of limine, and basically what that means is a procedure that allows litigators to seek to omit certain evidence to the jury that they may see as irrelevant or unreliable. So in this first instance, Tim's attorneys are expecting the government to attempt to introduce evidence consisting of text messages from Andre to his grandmother, Miss Robbie Montgomery. Now, I'm actually going to read this out to you. It starts off by saying, it is anticipated that the government may attempt to introduce evidence consisting of text message statements allegedly drafted and sent by Montgomery to his grandmother, Robbie Montgomery, to remind the court Montgomery is the individual who was shot and killed by co-defendant Hill, at least according to Hill's plea agreement in this case. More specifically, in March of 2016, Montgomery allegedly sent the following text messages to Miss Montgomery stating, Tim is after me or something, and I'm not running. I just don't want to get hurt, and I know what Tim is capable of doing, and I don't want anything to do with whatever he got going on. In other words, the government may attempt to introduce those texts to attempt to establish that Montgomery was afraid of Mr. Norman or had some reason to be afraid of him. It should be further noted that at the time Montgomery sent those texts, he was discussing with Miss Montgomery and attempting to avoid and make excuses for the possibility of returning to St. Louis to take a lie detector test regarding Montgomery's likely participation in the theft of money and property from Miss Montgomery's residence. Apart from those texts, the government may additionally attempt to introduce similar statements that Montgomery allegedly made either verbally or in writing to others. Any additional such statements are subject of this motion of limine. So just a little background as to why Andre was telling his grandmother, Miss Robbie Montgomery, that he was not running. He just was not in a rush to come back because of Tim. So what happened was roughly $200,000 in cash was taken from Miss Robbie's safe in her home. Also 2 guns, alcohol, gold, and diamond jewelry was also taken. Now Miss Robbie notified the police and told them that very few family members knew the code to her security system, including Tim and Andre. Now Tim was allegedly in California when this happened, and Andre ended up going out of town shortly after the robbery to do a gig with a rap group that he was a part of. Now, because very few people knew the code to Miss Robbie's home, Andre easily became a suspect. Now, he ran into some issues while in Texas and was not allowed to leave the state to travel back to St. Louis to do a polygraph test. Now, it took 9 months, but once his charges in Texas were dropped, he was able to come back to St. Louis, and he did take a polygraph test on March 10th of 2016. However, the results came back as inconclusive because he smoked some marijuana that day, but he promised them that he would stop smoking for a while so he can come back and retake the test. However, he was slain 4 days later and was never able to retake the polygraph test. So that's why he was telling his grandmother, hey grandma, it's not that I can't come back or it's not that I'm running. However, I heard that Tim was trying to do some harm to me, and this is the reason why I'm really in no rush to come back. Now, Tim's attorneys are not wanting Tim to be labeled as a bad guy, and they're considering what Andre said in those text messages as pure hearsay, although he did end up passing away shortly after those text messages were sent over to Miss Robbie. So Tim's attorneys are wanting to paint Andre, who was no longer here, as the bad guy in this situation and not use anything that Andre said to his grandmother as evidence against Tim, in fear that it would sway the jury's determination as to Tim's guilt or innocence. Now, the second motion of limine is against defendant Tre'vell Anthony Hill. Now, they're pretty much saying that Hill had impressions of what Tim Norman purportedly wanted him to do. Now, this is Tim's attorney. They go on to say this: the reason that the government is attempting to resort to reliance upon Hill's impression is simple. The government needs to establish an agreement between Hill and Mr. Norman for the killing of Montgomery, but no such agreement exists based upon the record evidence. Therefore, the government wants to go far beyond what Hill claims, which will likely be hotly contested at trial. Mr. Norman actually communicated to him about Montgomery and Mr. Norman's alleged intention with respect to Montgomery, and instead attempts to elicit Hill's impressions of those alleged communications. So pretty much what they're saying is they don't want the words of Tre'vell Anthony Hill stating that he had an agreement with Tim Norman to kill Andre Montgomery to sway the jurors. Tim's attorneys are saying, hey, there is no real proof. We just have to take his word for it, and we don't want to do that. And we don't want the jurors to hear that. So yes, he did take a plea deal. He did admit to shooting Andre, and he did admit that Tim gave him $5,000 to do so. But what proof do they have? It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So I am really hoping that the government will be able to prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt. But what Tim's attorneys are saying is that the government has no actual proof that that conversation happened. So we'll have to see what proof lies in between that information. But right now, Tim's attorneys are saying it didn't happen. Nonetheless, this is why they're being paid top dollar to get all of this information thrown out to try to prove Tim's innocence. It's going to be crazy to see how all of this plays out. All I could think about is Andre knowing or feeling like something was going to happen to him and his uncle was going to be the one to do it, and then he passes days later. I can only imagine what he was thinking when he actually got shot. He was afraid to come back to St. Louis because of that, and look what happened. Now what I want to do is hear from you. What do you think about everything happening with Tim Norman, him allegedly having cell phones belonging to the attorneys and being thrown in the hole? Also, what do you think about Andre talking to his grandmother or texting his grandmother allegedly and telling her that he was in fear of what his uncle could possibly do to him? Leave a comment and you know how we do. We'll talk about it down below. Talk to you guys later. Bye. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that bell so you don't miss any of my new episodes.